Sword Soul is doing the rounds and people want to see more of it, but instead of simply showing off more gameplay of the same deck, I decided to come up with something new. Now, I was toying around with this idea for a little bit before eventually arriving at this list. We're looking at Sword Soul, but only lightly branded. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, we're not actually playing Branded Fusion, nor a Despia package or anything like that, but what we are doing is we're taking full advantage of how stupid Nadir Servant is alongside the brand new card, Guiding Quem, the Virtuous. Now, this little combination of cards is brutal, and what is its synergy with the Sword Soul deck over other types of decks? Well, it's going to come down to Incredible Ecclesia, as well as the Iris Sword Soul. Now, there's a whole bunch of things I'm going to explain about the deck and the synergy, but what I'm going to do is show that at the end of the video after you've watched the replays so that you actually understand what it is I'm talking about. It's all well and good me explaining it, but if you haven't actually seen it, then how are you supposed to absorb the information? So I'm going to show you some replays, talk through some combos sort of as we're going along. At the end of the video, I'm going to break the deck down and we're going to talk about card choices, combo choices, that sort of thing, as well as potentially where you could continue to bring this deck. Because this is only the start. I only built this deck and I was doing a lot of testing, having a lot of fun with it. I really wanted to put the idea out there. But there's still a lot of room to maneuver with this strategy, this sort of idea. You can go further and deeper down the Branded or Despian rabbit hole if you wish. I feel like us right here is sort of like the sweet spot. I kind of like where we're sitting, but we might look into a Bestial list using Branded and High Spirit sometime soon as well. There's tons and tons of options. So if you want to see that, absolutely make sure you like and let me know down below what type of Sword Soul decks it is that you're playing. This, however, is going to be lightly branded today. So let's get into the replays. Deck profile at the end. Subscribe if you're new or you haven't subscribed. It's totally free. Show your support. Why not? We have smashed our 2023 goal. By the end of 2024, I'm thinking we're going to be aiming potentially for 10,000. Maybe. I would say 8,000 is a more realistic target, but let's just get into 2024 and then we'll worry about that. But for now, give us as big a head start as you possibly can by subscribing, liking the video. Let's just dive right in. Alright, now before somebody asks me in the comments, these are going to be very short replays, just showing off almost exclusively some of the tech and combos with the new cards, as well as some of the struggles of the deck as well. So I've got 3 short replays lined up. All are happening in Master 4, I believe we were in at the time. So Master rank gameplay all the way through, and this is going to be focusing around usage of the Nadir Servant, not really worrying too much about what our opponents got. So this is a really solid hand. Let's start with Ecclesia. Ecclesia then tributing itself to summon out the Moyi. Moyi then is going to reveal Taya, but get hit with Effect Veiler for a lot of Sword Soul decks. Now with a hand like this, maybe not, but with a lot of Sword Soul decks, an Imperm or a Veiler or a Negate on your Moyi spells death. That's just the end of your turn. With this hand, even in our regular Sword Soul deck, we probably wouldn't have been that stuck, but we're going to go through what to play in these situations as well. Basically, we're going to go for the Iris Sword Soul. The Iris Sword Soul, because our Moyi is now negated thanks to the Effect Veiler, we can summon out the Iris Sword Soul, which is basically just an extra boss monster. It can react to an opponent's special summon by either special summoning a monster of my own, drawing us 2 cards, or destroying a card our opponent controls. So the Iris Sword Soul is pretty fucking sick. We are going to go strategist now, dropping the Tide to summon itself in a token. We're going to use the token in the Moyi to go into the Grand Master. Pretty standard line here. Grand Master then and the Moyi are both going to activate. Moyi is going to draw us a card, and Grand Master is actually going to banish the Blackout from our deck. That's going to trigger Blackout's second effect to summon a token, which we can now use for a Synchro Summon. This is where Sword Soul ends its turn. We've got the Grand Master, we got Sinister. That's pretty good. Iris Sword Soul, Gravy on top. What more could we possibly want? Well, what I want is I want to use Nadir's Servant. We're going to go for Nadir's Servant, adding Ecclesia to our hand by sending Titaniclad to the graveyard. Now we're going to special summon the Ecclesia because we control Synchro monsters. It's going to use its effect to search our deck for Fleur-de-Lis. Now during the end phase, Titaniclad is going to activate to summon Guiding Quem from the deck. Guiding Quem then is going to send the Fallen of Albaz from our deck to the graveyard. So what exactly does this board do? Well, let's go through it. We can banish a special summon monster. We can banish an activated spell or trap. We can negate a monster effect. We can negate a monster effect. And then we can pop a special summon monster from our opponent's extra deck. And finally, we have the Guiding Quem, which will bring back the Fallen of Albaz from our graveyard to quick play fusion with one of our opponent's monsters during their turn into the Mirror Jade. Which will then, of course, be able to banish a card our opponent controls. That's 7 interruptions. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 interruptions. That's pretty fucking good. That's pretty good. And our opponent knows it, and they don't stick around. They're done. They're finito. Finished. They don't want any of what we're cooking, and I don't blame them. So that is basically the combo, right? So what we're going to be looking at is variations of it, sort of talking about the strengths and weaknesses. I do have 2 more replays lined up to sort of talk more about this, as well as show the combo in different circumstances. But yeah, that is essentially it. That is your new, like, ideal turn 1 board. Well, ideally your Moyi wouldn't have gotten negated, and we would have had like an additional interruption on top of all of that. We would have had Blackout, or we would have had Protoss, or we would have had some dumb shit. All in all, pretty fucking fire. Let's get in the game too. Alright, bit of a different hand here this time. So this is a pretty bad hand, I'm not gonna lie. So what are we gonna do? Let's look at the sort of power of Nadir's Servant, right? So we are going to summon out the Ashuna, normal summon the Ash to go into the Sinister Sovereign. This by itself is a decent enough card, but we did have to give up our Ash Blossom for it. Was that worth it? Well, it actually is, because now we're... First of all, he's going to go for Saronir. He was terrified of us using Ashuna's effect in Graveyard to special summon a Worm from deck, and rightly so. That's a pretty powerful effect, and you can't react to it. You have to preemptively banish it. So that's not a terrible assumption for our opponent to make, but it does give us a preemptive sort of early banish, which is pretty sick. We are going to go Nadir's Servant then, same thing as before. Send Titaniclad, grab the Ecclesia, special the Ecclesia, grab Fleur-de-Lis, just like that. That one copy of Nadir's Servant has set up 1, 2, 3 interruptions for us. It has the Fleur-de-Lis, the Fallen of Albaz, and the Mirror-Jade. 3 interruptions for 1 card with 0 cost, other than locking us out of the extra deck for the turn, but that doesn't even matter because we're done summoning. Brandon in High Spirits, then we're going to meet with a very swift Ash Blossom. Even in a very basic situation like this, you can see the power of Nadir's Servant, even almost by itself, is able to generate an incredible amount of advantage here. Maxi, of course, helping us out in this situation. Cross out to protect it. They're going to go to the Fallen of Albaz, discarding a card to fusion summon using one of our monsters. Of course, our Sinister Sovereign to go into Mirror-Jade, right? We're going to go Fleur-de-Lis, summon out Fleur-de-Lis, negate the Fallen of Albaz. We still have both our Sovereign interruptions. We still have our Gating Quem interruption. We still have our Fall of Albaz and the Mirror-Jade. It's just really fucking strong, and I feel like there's a lot of situations now where, because Nadir's Servant by itself is such a powerful card, that you're able to play under different circumstances than you normally would have, and Nadir's Servant itself plays into a lot of Sword Soul's weaknesses as well. It helps compensate for a lot of the things that Sword Soul is normally pretty fucking bad at. But anyways, let's get into a game where maybe things don't go quite according to plan. We've all been there, going second on the other end of a vicious Dragon Link summoning spree and beatdown. You're looking at this thing and you're thinking, how does this person have so many goddamn cards, have so much consistency, and put up such powerful broken boards? Now, Dragon Link is a deck that we're going to be covering again on the channel soon. I've done it in the past. It hasn't really changed per se. It just has more dragons. It's just more of the same shit with a different name on it, right? It's Dragon Link. They link dragons. It's that simple. So this guy's fucking popping off like crazy. So we're going second here. We're going to make an attempt to try to break this board. It is going to be a hard fucking challenge. Again, Dragon Link, one of the best decks in the game, healed, I think, at number 2 spot right now on the Master Duel meta tier list, with Branded taking spot number 1, Dragon Link at spot 2, and Vanquish Soul at spot 3. So Dragon Link is recognized and does definitely feel like one of the most powerful decks in the game, especially going first with 0 hand traps. And this is part of what I wanted to show off. Unfortunately, because you're going to be playing this Dogmatica engine, and you're going to be playing the Iris Sword Soul and playing all of these extra cards, you're going to find yourself in situations where you don't always have hand traps to deal with certain situations. You do have to cut down massively on your hand trap count to fit this stuff in. It comes down to a balance of wanting to play either reactively or proactively, right? Because sometimes 2 Synchro Monsters just isn't enough to do the job. Now, our opponent finally finishes their turn with a shitload of interruptions. So they have a, let's quickly recap their board. They have a Monster Negate, they have a Monster Negate / Pop, they have a Pop, they have a Bestial in hand, and they have IP Masquerena. Plus, the Branded Regain is going to be able to bring back a Drissworm from their graveyard, which is an additional interruption. So the odds are pretty stacked against us here, but we're going to make an effort to try and play through as much as we can, because we're not quitters, right? We're not quitters. We're going to start with Ecclesia then. Special summon the Ecclesia. That does, of course, trigger the Drissworm to come out. We knew that was coming. On top of all of that, our opponent also hits us with the Maxi. It happens, right? Again, what are we going to do? Are we just going to leave? We're just going to surrender? No, why would we do that, right? There's still a chance that we win this. Slim, but it exists. We're going to reveal the Moyi, or sorry, use the Moyi to reveal the Ashuna to summon out a Sword Soul token. They are going to very quickly banish the Ecclesia from our graveyard using their Baldrake, so that they can use their Baldrake, of course, against us. So we are going to Synchro Summon here. We Synchro Summon into Dragite. Now that's sort of dual purpose, right? Because I knew they were going to be using their Baldrake to try and banish us. So rather than waste a Grandmaster, which could be useful later, again, we have a pretty solid hand, so I know I'm going to be able to go into a Grandmaster later in my turn. We're going to go for a strategist here. We're going to drop the Ashuna to the graveyard. They're going to go for Bestial Dispatter, shuffling back one of their own monsters to pop our strategist. Very unfortunate. Sword Soul Emergence then coming out, being met with an Ash Blossom. The guy simply has everything, but luckily we at least have Caught by the Grave on this occasion to try to counter that Ash Blossom to put up some form of interruption. We have yet to normal summon, by the way. We're playing through quite a lot of interruption here, but we're not making very much headway against such an intimidating board set up by our opponent. We are going to go for now the Vishuda, summoning it out to the field, linking it off into Monk of the Tenyi. They're going to go for Branded Beast here, immediately tributing off the Baldrake to pop the Monk of the Tenyi. Unfortunately, we do not get the Vishuda bounce. We're going to use Taya. Taya then being met with the Boral and Dragon's Monster Negate. And again, it is just putting us in a rough spot. At this point, we go for the Iris Sword Soul, but the Iris Sword Soul by itself does not have nearly enough attacking power to try and make a dent in this board by itself. Not that it's going to be sticking around, because they're going to go for Goddess, and that is the final nail in the coffin. We tried our best to play through. We played through all of our opponent's interruptions, even some extra ones that they drew into off of Maxi, but unfortunately, we just couldn't generate the momentum we needed to finish the game. Now, Sword Soul has always, well, not always, but does struggle going second, just sort of by and large, and it does have weaknesses inherent to certain types of decks, certain types of hand traps and eruptions, even more so than what perhaps other decks in the higher echelons of Master Duel do. We're going to talk about those specifics in just a minute, but again, I wanted to just show you that it's not going to be the best deck in the game. There are decks out there that are better. Dragon Link branded are better decks than Sword Soul. Again, as much as I love Sword Soul and I would like to call it the best deck, it simply isn't. So you're going to struggle going second a little bit, as you would with any other Sword Soul list, but we made a really good attempt. I'm very happy with how that game turned out, even though we ended up losing. I feel like we played through quite a lot of interruption and made a very solid attempt at breaking that board. It didn't work, but it is what it is, right? Let's just get in and we'll have a look at the actual deck itself. And this is the deck list. Now, this is fairly similar to the Sword Soul Tenyi list we had uploaded over the last week and a half or so. Some of the key differences, of course, we have replaced the Ringo. The Ringo didn't really do an awful lot for us in this particular list because we're not focusing too much on the Tenyis or the non-effect monsters. And what do we actually need to add in or make room for? Well, we needed to make room for one copy of Ecclesia, one copy of the Fallen of Albaz, one copy of Guiding Quem the Virtuous, 3 copies of Nadir Servant. Nadir Servant is broken. We are also playing Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis, the Knighted, as well as the Iris Sword Soul. Those are the main deck cards that we needed to make space for, and why those cards in particular? Well, it all falls to Nadir Servant. Nadir Servant basically allows you to send a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard to add a Dogmatika monster or the Fallen of Albaz from your deck to your hand. So this allows you to put a card from your extra deck into the grave. The card that we're putting from extra deck to grave is the Titaniclad, the Ash Dragon. Very specific target. So what is the idea behind this? Well, Nadir Servant is going to be able to grab you the Ecclesia. Ecclesia then can special summon itself to the field if a monster special summoned from the extra deck is currently on the field. Now, of course, you're going to have those because you're playing Sword Soul. You have Synchro monsters, you have Grandmaster, you have the Sinister Sovereign, you have Baron, you have whatever, right? You're going to have something on the field that was summoned from the extra deck. That's just what your deck does. So the Ecclesia is a free special summon, first and foremost. And secondly, it will then search your deck for another Dogmatika card. We're going to search our deck for Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis. Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis can special summon itself from the hand, again, so long as there's an extra deck monster on board. And if there's also a Dogmatika monster, you get to negate a monster's effect on the field for that turn without targeting. Non-targeting negation and a quick play. Very good. And on a big body. 25/25 is not small. So that's the general sort of gist. And now there's a reason as to why we picked these particular cards in this particular combo. The reason I like all of these is that no singular card is a brick other than the Fallen of Albaz in most circumstances. This guy's the only brick that you have to play. And why are we playing him? Well, after you do your whole Nadir Servant nonsense, right? You send Titaniclad to the graveyard. During your end phase, you're going to summon Gating Quem the Virtuous from your deck to the field. Quem, on summon, will send the Fallen of Albaz to the graveyard. This card, the moment a monster is removed from either player's extra deck, you get to special summon a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it from your graveyard to the field. Now, in most circumstances, you're going to be using that effect to bring back the Fallen of Albaz because a monster has just left their extra deck, i.e. they fucking summoned something. You're going to use the Fallen of Albaz to discard a card to fusion summon into Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon, which is a furiously powerful boss monster, one of the best in the entirety of Master Duel. So it gives you quick access to that. What it also does, in a pinch or in different circumstances, is it can bring back Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous. Now, there are several different circumstances under which that would be useful. First and foremost, if you want to generate follow-up card advantage. Incredible Ecclesia, what it does is it contributes itself as a quick effect to special summon either a Sword Soul monster directly from deck to field or the Fallen of Albaz. That is why, or part of why I should say, we're playing the Iris Sword Soul. Not only is the Iris Sword Soul, generally speaking, a pretty decent card, it is also now part of our Ecclesia engine, because what if your opponent's not playing a deck that plays from the extra deck? Well, that means that Albaz is not really going to be that useful, is he? So what you're going to do is, instead of bringing back Albaz with the Quem, you're going to use Quem to bring back Ecclesia. You can either use Ecclesia during your own turn to bring out a Sword Soul monster, or during your opponent's turn to bring out the Iris Sword Soul, which is in and of itself a pretty decent boss monster. It can react to a special summon from your opponent depending upon where the special summon came from. If it was from the hand, you get to summon a monster of your own from the hand. If it was from the deck, you get to draw 2 cards, or if it was from the extra deck, you get to pop one of those cards. That's pretty fucking sick. So it gives you quick and easy access to either a Fallen of Albaz for a Mirror Jade play, or an Ecclesia for an Iris Sword Soul play, both of which are pretty fucking awesome. None of these cards are really bad to have in hand. Fleur-de-Lis, Fallen of Albaz is kind of bad to have in hand, but Ecclesia is a good card to have because you can just normal summon it. Use its effect to search. You can just special summon, you can do whatever, right? If you have a really bad hand, Nadir Servant or Ecclesia by themselves get you an interruption or something to do, which is better than nothing. So Ecclesia, not a brick. Quem, not a brick. Again, just summon it, and it will send the Fallen of Albaz and do all of that crazy shit, right? The Iris Sword Soul, you can special summon this card from your hand if a monster on the field currently has its effects negated. For example, if they imperm one of your monsters, or they effect feeler one of your monsters, you can then just summon the Iris Sword Soul. Or you can negate one of theirs. You can use the Grandmaster to target and negate one of their monster's effects, and now you can summon the Iris Sword Soul. So it's, again, not a brick in hand. Fleur-de-Lis is not a brick in hand because quite often, whenever you're using this, you're going to have access to a Dogmatika on field through one means or another. Even if they deal with your Ecclesia, you're going to have Quem. Quem counts as a Dogmatika monster. So there's a lot of circumstances in which you'll be able to use these cards even outside of this combo directly, which is why I'm quite comfortable with playing it. I think it's definitely very complementary to what the deck wants to do. It helps it play through and around a lot of the deck's common weaknesses, because the deck normally, for example, would struggle to get off the ground if you normal summon your Mo Ye and it gets negated. Now you've got an entirely separate line of play within the Nadir Servant, which is almost independent of your Sword Soul plays. I say almost because to get it to full effect, you do need to have an extra deck monster on field, which could be a Tenyi summon, which could be a Synchro monster, which could be anything, right? But it does help if you have one. It's not essential because, again, the whole grabbing Ecclesia going into Fleur-de-Lis, that's optional. That is just extra. The bonus, the real objective in the Nadir Servant is to send Titaniclad to summon the Quem during the end phase to get the Fallen of Albaz to grave and do the whole Quem play. So no matter what, even if you're completely bricked up, right? You've got Nadir Servant, you've got Mo Ye, and you get 3 dead cards. Nadir Servant by itself sets up the Fallen of Albaz play, which is at least 2 interruptions. It's pretty good. So I feel like it plays into a lot of the deck's strengths and weaknesses pretty well. It helps the deck play through or around Maxi a little bit better as well, because again, Nadir Servant doesn't really demand a lot in terms of special summoning. By itself, it doesn't actually have any inherent special summoning conditions. If you add the Ecclesia, you're under no mandate to special summon it, and even if you do, you're special summoning it, giving them one card, grabbing one card yourself, and that one card is a negate. So you're able to basically just cancel out their card while giving yourself one more. So usually it's actually worth it. But so Nadir Servant is really good. I don't know, it just helps. Just everything about it, I just makes sense. I just like it. I think it's a very new and different way of looking at Sword Soul, and I feel like the more different ways of playing the deck we can experiment with, the closer we're going to get to having a range of different variations that as a community we can be quite happy with. Now the only issue, the only problem with this deck, in terms of compatibility that I can see, lies with Ashuna. So this card, if you use this card, and it's only if you use this card's second effect, it locks you in the worms. Now this card it's too powerful to cut. That second effect is very, very useful in some niche situations. You're not going to use it very often, but in the circumstances where you do use it, it can be very, very useful. So it's definitely not cutting the card. However, you have two ways in which you can deal with this problem. You can either, A, reduce the number of copies of Ashuna you're playing relative to your other Tinyis. So for example, if you want to cut Ashuna down to 1, and then maybe play 2 Adara and 3 Vishuda, right? Maybe you want to do that. The problem still exists, but it's much, much smaller. That's a possible solution. Another possible solution is that rather than reducing this down, you could instead include the Albion, the Branded Dragon, in your extra deck. And then you could have the Branded Opening in your deck. Where is it? Where is it? Where's Branded Opening? Here. Branded Opening. Sorry about that. So, those are the two ways you can fix it. Now, how does this fix it? So what you're going to do is, if you have had to go into an Ashuna lock really early in the turn before using Nadir Servant, and it will be before you use Nadir Servant because Nadir Servant locks you out of the extra deck, so you will know by the time you use Nadir Servant whether or not you are worm locked. And if you are worm locked, the Albion plays around it differently, because what you're basically going to do is, instead of summoning it during the end phase with Titaniclad, which wouldn't be possible, you're instead going to use Albion to set Branded Opening to your field, and then right away during your opponent's turn, you flip that shit up, immediately summon Quem, right? So it accomplishes the same goal, it just does it slightly differently. It's not as good in terms of card advantage. However, it will fix your problem, and you do not have to reduce the number of Ashunas you have to play, and it might even open up a whole different branch of play, right? Because if you're already playing Branded Opening, well then why not play a single Alibur, or why not play this, why not play that, right? So it may end up being the way to play it. However, you're also then expanding into a whole sort of new avenue that's going to have its own problems. And right now, we're focused on fixing Sword Soul's problems rather than trying to introduce Despian problems, right? So that's my thoughts on the deck. Again, talking through the cards and the combos, I feel like that's pretty much it. In terms of the extra deck, our choices with the extra deck are, again, pretty straightforward. Titaniclad and Lulu Wallalith are your primary sort of send targets for like Nadir Servant. This card is also summonable and pretty decent on board, actually. So this is a pretty awesome card no matter what. But these are your primary send targets. They both basically kind of do the same thing. Titaniclad will summon a Dogmatika monster or a Fallen of Albaz. The Despian Lulu Wallalith, or Lulu, will summon a light spellcaster whose attack and defense are equal. That is going to be Quem, Ecclesia, or the Iris Sword Soul, or technically Fleur-de-Lis as well, but never Fleur-de-Lis. So usually it's going to be either getting Quem, the Iris Sword Soul, or maybe sometimes the Incredible Ecclesia. It depends on the situation, depends on the board, right? So Lulu has a few potential things it can do as well, but it's very, very, very similar to Titaniclad in how it actually works. To the point where you probably don't even really need to use Titaniclad. You could probably just get away with Lulu. However, I'm pretty sure Lulu only special summons. Yeah, it does. It does not add... It doesn't give you the option to add the hand. And the option to add the hand is pretty useful in case you already have maybe Quem in play and you just want to grab a Fleur-de-Lis to your hand, right? So Titanic gives you more flexibility, however they're very similar in application to Lulu. And the other cards here, Sprind and Rindbrum, these are purely targets for Mirror Jade to send from extra deck to graveyard. Remember, you still need cards in your extra deck for this shit to send in order to banish, right? Still needs cost for its effect. And these are the best two that I could think of. Sprind is good because it serves as a positive alternative fusion target. So its conditions for summon are very generic, which means if you've already used Mirror Jade, or in certain matchups where Mirror Jade is not super applicable, i.e. Labyrinth, right? You can instead summon Sprind. And Rindbrum has one of the more useful effects from Grave because it's able to just freely resummon a Fallen of Albaz during a follow-up turn later on in the game. So these are just two of the more powerful targets that I could see that didn't require me to play additional cards in the main deck. I didn't want to like play an Albion and then have to play a card in my deck to get value out of the Albion or anything like that. I just wanted cards that were going to be straightforward. They add value to my play without demanding additional sacrificing in terms of main deck space. So I feel like these two are the best two that I can think of. If you've got another one, let me know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but whatever. You guys feel free to let me know down below what you would pick. But those are my suggestions for the extra deck lineup, and the rest of it is pretty much standard Sword Soul. Again, I went through this list quite a number of times over the last couple of weeks, so I'm not going to waste my time going back over it. Not going to waste your time either. If you want a full breakdown of the Sword Soul deck list, you can check back to our previous videos, or even the one that'll be linked at the end of this one. But I don't really have very much else to say, so if you've got this far, make sure you subscribe. Obviously, if you got this far, you enjoyed something, right? And if you want to see more like this every single day, make sure you subscribe. We try to get videos up every day as much as we possibly can, and every little bit of support really does help. You can like this video as well to help it reach out to more people so that we can grow as quickly as possible. Again, like I said, we have shattered our 2023 target. Really, really good year. Our first full year on YouTube from January to December, our first full year, and it's been amazing. So let's just keep up the momentum, right? Let's just carry it into 2024 and blow this year out of the fucking park. Let's fucking do it. So again, if you want to be part of that journey, subscribe, like this video to help it reach more people. You can join us as a member if you are so inclined. You have the ability to do so. It does help support the channel even more. But I'm not going to sit and rant at you anymore. I'm going to let you get back to your day. Bye-bye.